I never thought parking my work truck in my own driveway would land me in a legal battle with a woman who had nothing better to do than measure the exact height of my Ford F-350. But here we are. My name is Isaac Jennings, and I'm a 34-year-old electrician living in Mesa, Arizona. I bought my house in the Sunrise Ridge subdivision 3 years ago, right after my divorce was finalized. The place wasn't fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home with beige stucco exterior that matched every other house on the block. The neighborhood seemed quiet enough when I moved in, and the HOA fees were reasonable at $75 a month. I figured it was a fair trade for having someone else maintain the common areas and keep the neighborhood looking decent. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in March. I had just gotten home from a commercial job in Scottsdale around 7:30 a.m., exhausted from working a night shift rewiring an office building. I pulled my work truck into the driveway like I'd done hundreds of times before, grabbed my tool bag, and headed inside for a shower and some much-needed sleep. I was barely out of the shower when my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a woman I'd seen around the neighborhood but never actually spoken to. She was somewhere in her late 40s, with highlighted blonde hair cut in that specific style that screams, "I want to speak to the manager." She wore pristine white capri pants and a coral-colored blouse, despite it being barely 8 in the morning. "Can I help you?" I asked, still toweling my hair dry. "I'm Brenda Morrison, president of the Sunrise Ridge HOA board," she announced, like I should be impressed. "We need to discuss your vehicle situation immediately." I glanced past her at my truck sitting peacefully in my driveway. "What situation?" "That commercial truck is in violation of our HOA covenants," she said, pulling out a printed document from the leather portfolio she was carrying. Section 7.3 clearly states that commercial vehicles, work trucks, and any vehicle displaying company logos are prohibited from being parked in driveways or streets within the community. I rubbed my eyes, too tired for this conversation. "It's my work truck. I'm an electrician. I park it at my house because that's where I live." "Nevertheless, it's a violation," Brenda insisted. "You have 48 hours to remove it from the property, or we'll begin issuing fines of $100 per day." "You've got to be kidding me." "I assure you, Mr. Jennings, the HOA board takes these matters very seriously. We've worked hard to maintain property values in this neighborhood, and commercial vehicles are unsightly." I looked at my truck again. Sure, it had Jennings Electrical Services painted on the side along with my license number, but it wasn't like I was parking a garbage truck or a cement mixer. It was just a white Ford F-350 with a utility bed and some lettering. "Where exactly am I supposed to park it?" I asked. "That's not the HOA's concern," Brenda said with a tight smile. "Perhaps you could rent a storage unit or park it at a commercial facility. Many tradespeople make such arrangements. Those cost money I'd be spending to not park my truck at my own house that I own." Again, not the HOA's concern. The rules exist for everyone's benefit. I'm sure you understand. She handed me a formal violation notice printed on HOA letterhead. 48 hours, Mr. Jennings. Have a good day." She walked away before I could respond, her wedge sandals clicking on the concrete with an irritating precision. I stood there holding the notice, my exhaustion replaced by a growing anger. I'd been parking my truck in that driveway for 3 years without a single complaint. Why was this suddenly an issue? I went inside and actually read through the HOA covenants for the first time since I'd bought the house. Sure enough, buried in Section 7.3 was language about commercial vehicles. But the wording was vague, referring to commercial trucks and vehicles of a commercial nature that detract from the residential character of the community. There was no definition of what constituted a commercial vehicle, no size limits, nothing specific. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. The whole situation gnawed at me. Around noon, I called my buddy Marcus, who lived 2 streets over in the same neighborhood. He ran a landscaping business and drove a truck that was easily as large as mine, complete with his company name and phone number on the side. Marcus, it's Isaac. Quick question: has the HOA ever hassled you about your work truck? Not once, man. Why? I told him about Brenda's visit. He was quiet for a moment. That's weird. I've lived here for 5 years, always parked my truck at home, never heard a word about it. Your truck's even bigger than mine. Yeah, and I've got a trailer half the time too. You know what? I bet this is personal. Brenda tried to get me to use her brother's landscaping company for the HOA common areas last year. I told her my prices would be better, and she went with some overpriced outfit from Temp instead. She's been cold to me ever since, but she hasn't messed with my truck. So why is she targeting me? No idea, but Brenda's got a reputation. She runs that HOA board like her personal fiefdom. Her and her little crew of yes men or yes women, I guess. They're all retired with nothing better to do than police the neighborhood. After I hung up with Marcus, I decided to do some investigating. I drove around the subdivision for an hour, documenting every work vehicle I could find. There were at least a dozen. A plumber 2 blocks away had a truck with a huge wrench graphic on it. An HVAC guy had a van with his company information. Even a real estate agent had her face and phone number plastered across her SUV. None of them had violation notices stuck to their windshields. This was definitely personal, but I had no idea why. I'd never even met Brenda Morrison before today. That evening, I decided to attend the HOA's monthly board meeting. According to the notice on the community website, they met on the first Tuesday of every month at the clubhouse near the subdivision entrance. I figured I'd present my case, show them I wasn't the only person with a work vehicle, and hopefully get this resolved before I had to start paying fines. The clubhouse was a small building with a kitchenette and a main room full of folding chairs. About 15 people were scattered around when I arrived. Brenda sat at a folding table at the front with 4 other board members, all women around her age. I recognized one of them as Linda something or other from 3 houses down. Brenda's expression soured when she saw me walk in, but she recovered quickly with that fake smile she seemed to have perfected. The meeting started with typical HOA business, approving the minutes from last month, discussing landscaping bids for the entrance area, debating whether to repaint the clubhouse. It was mind-numbingly boring. Finally, Brenda asked if there was any new business. I raised my hand. I'd like to discuss the commercial vehicle policy. That's not new business, Brenda said. That's an existing policy that's being enforced. If you have a violation, you can submit a written appeal to the board and we'll review it at next month's meeting. Next month. The fine starts in 48 hours. Then I suggest you remove the vehicle while your appeal is being considered. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. I pressed on. I've been parking my work truck at my house for 3 years without any issues. And I'm not the only person in this neighborhood with a work vehicle. I counted at least 12 others today. Why am I being singled out? You're not being singled out, Brenda said, her smile evaporating. The board has decided to begin stricter enforcement of existing policies. We have to start somewhere. Starting with me specifically, while ignoring everyone else seems like the definition of singling out. One of the other board members, a woman with short gray hair, leaned forward. Mr. Jennings, we've received complaints about your vehicle. Multiple complaints from neighbors who feel it's commercial in nature and doesn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. From who? We don't disclose the identities of complainants, Brenda interjected smoothly. That's board policy to protect privacy. So anonymous complaints that I can't verify or respond to. The complaints are documented and on file. That's all you need to know. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos I'd taken that afternoon. Here's a plumbing truck 3 times the size of mine. Here's an HVAC van. Here's a landscaping truck with a trailer. All within this neighborhood. Are they all getting violation notices too? Brenda didn't even look at my phone. As I said, we have to start somewhere. Those vehicles will be addressed in due course if they violate the covenants. This is selective enforcement, and you know it. Mr. Jennings, you're becoming hostile. If you can't discuss this civilly, I'll have to ask you to leave. I wasn't being hostile, but I could feel myself getting there. A middle-aged man in the back spoke up. Seems like he's got a point, Brenda. My nephew drives a cable company van, parks it at his house here all the time. Never heard anything about it. Does the van have commercial lettering? Brenda asked. Big as day, company logo and everything. Brenda made a note on her pad. We'll look into that. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. The meeting devolved from there. Every point I tried to make, Brenda deflected or shut down. The other board members just nodded along with whatever she said. I left 40 minutes later having accomplished exactly nothing. Over the next 2 days, I tried to figure out what to do. Storage units in Macer ranged from $150 to $300 per month for something big enough to hold my truck. Parking at a commercial lot would cost roughly the same. I couldn't afford an extra $200 a month on top of my mortgage, HOA fees, and everything else. And the principle of the thing stuck in my craw. Why should I have to pay to park my work vehicle somewhere else when I owned a house with a perfectly good driveway? On the 3rd day, true to her word, Brenda left another notice on my door. I was now being fined $100 per day until the vehicle was removed. The notice included a statement that if fines exceeded $1,000, the HOA could place a lien on my property. That's when I decided I needed legal help. I spent that evening researching attorneys who dealt with HOA disputes. Most wanted retainers of $5,000 or more just to get started, which I definitely couldn't afford. Then, I found a law firm called Desert Legal Services that offered free initial consultations. I called first thing Friday morning and somehow got an appointment for that same afternoon. The law office was in a strip mall off Main Street, sandwiched between a tax preparation service and a chiropractor. The lawyer I met with was a guy about my age named Thomas Reyes. He had dark hair, wore jeans and a button-down shirt, and had the casual demeanor of someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone. So, HOA problems, he said after I'd explained the situation. I handle a fair number of these. Let me see the violation notices and your HOA covenants. I handed everything over. He read through it all carefully, making notes on a legal pad. Okay, couple of things, he said after about 10 minutes. First, the good news. Arizona has pretty specific laws about what HOAs can and can't regulate when it comes to vehicles. Arizona Revised Statute 33-1809 deals with this exact issue. There's a law about it. Oh yeah, Arizona is pretty protective of property rights, especially when it comes to work vehicles. The statute basically says that HOAs can't ban pickup trucks, even if they're used for commercial purposes, as long as they meet certain criteria. What criteria? Thomas pulled up something on his computer. The truck has to be under a certain weight, 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. It can't have more than 2 axles, and it can't be a semi-truck or similar vehicle. What do you drive? Ford F-350 with a utility bed. Single rear wheel, definitely under 10,000 pounds. 2 axles. Then you're golden. The HOA legally cannot ban you from parking it at your house, regardless of what their covenants say. State law supersedes HOA rules. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Are you sure? Positive. This statute was specifically passed because HOAs all over Arizona were doing exactly what yours is doing, targeting tradespeople and contractors. The legislature put a stop to it back in 2014. Your HOA's covenant section about commercial vehicles is unenforceable when it comes to pickup trucks that meet the statutory requirements. So what do I do? First, I'll write a letter to your HOA board explaining the law and demanding they rescind the violations and fines. That usually resolves it. If they push back, we can file an injunction. We could also potentially sue for harassment and attorney's fees if they've acted in bad faith. How much is this going to cost me? Thomas leaned back in his chair. The letter, $300. If we have to go to court, we'll talk about fees, but honestly, most HOAs back down once they realize they're legally wrong. They don't want to rack up legal fees defending an unwinnable position. It was money I didn't really have, but it was way better than paying $100 a day in fines or $200 a month for storage. I agreed, and Thomas said he'd have a letter drafted by Monday. That weekend, I got a nasty surprise. On Saturday morning, I found a bright orange sticker plastered across my truck's driver's side window. It read, "Violation, unauthorized vehicle. Tow within 24 hours or vehicle will be removed at owner's expense." I called Thomas immediately, even though it was Saturday. He actually answered. "They can't do that," he said after I explained. "They have no legal authority to tow your vehicle from your own property. That sticker is just intimidation. Don't remove your truck. Take photos of the sticker and any other documentation." This actually helps our case because it shows they're being aggressive and unreasonable. They're really going to tow my truck. They can't legally, but some HOAs are dumb enough to try. If a tow truck shows up, call me immediately and also call the police. Non-emergency line. Tell them someone is attempting to unlawfully tow your vehicle from your private property. I spent the rest of the weekend anxious, checking my driveway every few hours. Sunday afternoon, I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard a truck engine. I looked out to see a flatbed tow truck pulling up in front of my house. I ran outside. A guy in a greasy shirt was already hooking up to my truck's front wheels. "Hey, what are you doing?" "Got a call from the HOA to remove this vehicle," he said, not even looking at me. "This is my property. You can't tow my truck without my permission. HOA says it's in violation. I'm just doing my job, man." I pulled out my phone and called 911, then quickly corrected myself and asked for the non-emergency line. While I waited to be transferred, I called out to the tow truck driver. "You need to stop right now. I'm calling the police. You're illegally towing a vehicle from private property without the owner's consent." That got his attention. He paused, wrench in hand. "The HOA authorized it. The HOA doesn't own my truck or my property. They have no authority to tow my vehicle." A Mesa Police Department officer arrived surprisingly quickly, about 10 minutes later. I explained the situation while the tow truck driver stood there looking increasingly uncomfortable. The officer, a young guy named Officer Patterson, examined the HOA violation notices and the tow truck driver's work order. "Who called you to tow this vehicle?" Patterson asked the driver. "HOA president. Brenda something." "Morrison," I supplied. Patterson looked at me. "Is this your vehicle on your property?" "Yes, sir. I own the house and the truck. Any loans or liens that would give someone else a repossession right?" "No. It's paid off, registered to me." Patterson turned to the tow driver. "You need to unhook the vehicle." You can't tow someone's property from their own driveway without their consent or a court order. The HOA doesn't have that authority. But they said, I don't care what they said. Unhook it now, or I'll cite you for attempted theft. The driver quickly unhooked my truck and left, grumbling about wasted time. Patterson wrote up a report and gave me a case number. You should probably talk to a lawyer, he said. HOA disputes are civil matters mostly, but what they just tried crosses into criminal territory. Attempted theft of a vehicle is serious. I've got a lawyer. This is going to make his day, Patterson chuckled. I bet. Good luck with it. After he left, I called Thomas and told him what happened. He was quiet for a long moment. They actually tried to tow it. Wow, okay, this changes things. That's not just aggressive HOA enforcement. That's potentially criminal. Do you have the police report number? I gave it to him. Perfect. I'm going to draft a much more strongly worded letter, and we're going to include a demand that they reimburse you for any attorney's fees already incurred. We'll also mention that their attempted towing constitutes theft, and that you're considering filing criminal complaints against board members individually. Can I do that? Absolutely. They authorized the theft of your property. Whether the police would actually press charges is another question, but the threat alone should make them back off. This is way over the line. Monday morning, Thomas sent the letter. He copied me on the email and also sent a hard copy via certified mail to Brenda Morrison and the HOA's registered agent. The letter was beautifully written, laying out the specifics of Arizona Revised Statute 33-1809, citing several case precedents, and explaining in clear terms that the HOA's actions were not only legally wrong but potentially criminal. It demanded immediate rescission of all violations and fines, a written apology, and reimbursement of my attorney's fees to date. I expected some kind of response. What I got was silence. Days passed. The certified mail receipt came back showing Brenda had signed for the letter, but there was no reply. The violations stayed on my HOA account. The fines kept accumulating. They're playing chicken, Thomas said when I called him Thursday afternoon. They think you'll back down or can't afford to fight them. What's our next move? We file an injunction in Maricopa County Superior Court. We ask the judge to order the HOA to stop assessing fines and to confirm that their commercial vehicle policy doesn't apply to your truck under state law. It'll cost you another $1,000 or so in filing fees and my time, but we should win. I emptied my savings account and paid him. Thomas filed the paperwork on Friday. We got a hearing date for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, life got weird in the neighborhood. Word had apparently spread about my dispute with the HOA. Some neighbors were supportive, stopping me when I was out front to say they thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Others gave me cold looks or didn't acknowledge me at all. Someone left an anonymous note in my mailbox saying I was ruining property values and should just follow the rules like everyone else. The worst was Linda from down the street, one of the HOA board members. I ran into her at the grocery store, and she made a point of loudly saying, "Some people just think they're above the rules," while staring directly at me. I ignored her. Marcus kept me sane through all of it. We'd grab beers at a dive bar near his house, and he'd let me vent. He was dealing with his own Brenda Morrison drama. She'd apparently started sending him violation notices too, after I'd mentioned his truck in the board meeting. But his notices were for minor things like his trash cans being visible from the street and a crack in his driveway that needed repair. "She's petty," Marcus said over a beer. "Real petty. You know what I heard? She tried to get herself elected to the Mesa City Council a few years back and lost badly. Like, embarrassingly badly. Ever since then, she runs this HOA like she's governing a small country. power trip man. The court date finally arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. I wore my best khaki pants and a button-down shirt. Thomas met me at the Maricopa County Superior Court building downtown, looking professional in a suit. "Just be calm and respectful," he coached me outside the courtroom. "The judge will probably ask you some questions. Keep your answers brief and factual. Don't editorialize or get emotional. Got it?" We entered the courtroom and found seats. A few minutes later, Brenda Morrison walked in with another woman I didn't recognize. The woman wore a business suit and carried a leather briefcase. An attorney, obviously. Thomas leaned over. "They lawyered up. Good. That means they're taking this seriously." The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Carmichael. She had reading glasses perched on her nose and radiated an aura of no-nonsense efficiency. Our case was third on the morning docket. When our turn came, Thomas laid out the facts clearly and concisely. He explained the statute, showed photos of my truck, and presented documentation of its weight and specifications. He walked the judge through the HOA's violations, the attempted towing, and the police report from that incident. Then it was the HOA attorney's turn. Her name was Sharon Kowalski, and she argued that the HOA's covenants were created before the statute was passed and should be grandfathered in. She claimed that my truck was excessively commercial in nature, with large lettering that detracted from the neighborhood. She also argued that the statute only protected trucks used for personal use, not vehicles used primarily for business. Judge Carmichael listened to both sides, asked a few clarifying questions, and then took a short recess to review the statute and case law. When she returned 20 minutes later, her decision was swift. "I've reviewed Arizona Revised Statute 33-1809 and the relevant cases. The law is quite clear. The statute explicitly states that HOAs may not prohibit pickup trucks, even those used for commercial purposes, as long as they meet the specified criteria. Mr. Jennings's vehicle clearly meets those criteria. It's under 10,000 pounds. It's a standard pickup truck configuration, and it's being parked on his own property." She looked directly at the HOA's attorney. The statute was passed in 2014 specifically to address this exact type of HOA overreach. There's no grandfather clause. The law applies to all HOA covenants, regardless of when they were written. The HOA's policy is unenforceable as applied to vehicles that meet the statutory requirements. Judge Carmichael continued, "Furthermore, I'm troubled by the HOA's attempt to tow Mr. Jennings's vehicle from his private property. That goes well beyond enforcement of covenants and borders on a legal seizure. The HOA had no legal authority to do that." She signed the order Thomas had prepared. The injunction is granted. The HOA is ordered to immediately cease assessing fines against Mr. Jennings for parking his truck on his property. All fines previously assessed are vacated. The HOA will reimburse Mr. Jennings for his attorney's fees to date. Additionally, the HOA is prohibited from taking any further action regarding Mr. Jennings's pickup truck as long as it continues to meet the statutory requirements. Just like that, it was over. The whole hearing had taken maybe 45 minutes. As we left the courtroom, I could see Brenda Morrison's face turning red while she argued with her attorney in hushed, angry tones. Outside, Thomas shook my hand. "That went about as well as it could have. You won decisively. They have to reimburse your attorney's fees, which means this whole thing cost you nothing in the end. When will they pay? They have 30 days to comply with the court order. If they don't, we can pursue enforcement and rack up more fees for them to pay. Trust me, they'll pay." I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The constant stress of wondering if I'd come home to find my truck towed or another violation notice had been eating at me. Now it was done. But as I would learn, Brenda Morrison didn't give up easily. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I received a new violation notice. This one wasn't about my truck. It was about my front yard. According to the notice, my landscaping was inadequate and not in keeping with neighborhood standards. I was ordered to install new plants, add decorative rock, and reseed the grass within 30 days. I stared at the notice in disbelief. My yard wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. I kept the grass mowed and the weeds pulled. It looked like every other yard on the block, which is to say, typical Arizona desert landscaping with some grass, some rocks, and some struggling shrubs that barely survived the summer heat. I took photos of my yard and photos of every other yard on my street. They were all virtually identical. I sent everything to Thomas with a note. "She's retaliating." Thomas called me that evening. "Yeah, this is textbook retaliation. The timing alone proves it. 2 weeks after you beat them in court, suddenly your landscaping is a problem. We can fight this, but I'll be honest, landscaping disputes are harder. They're more subjective than the vehicle issue. Judges give HOAs more discretion on aesthetic matters. So, what do I do? Document everything. Take photos showing your yard looks like everyone else's. If they fine you, we'll argue selective enforcement and retaliation. It's not as clean-cut as the truck issue, but we can make their lives difficult." I decided to ignore the notice. If they wanted to fine me, I'd deal with it then. I wasn't spending hundreds of dollars on landscaping just because Brenda Morrison was on a power trip. The fine started 2 weeks later, $50 a day. Thomas sent another letter, this one focusing on retaliation and selective enforcement. The HOA's attorney responded with photos that had clearly been taken with selective angles to make my yard look worse than it was. They claimed multiple neighbors had complained. "Same playbook," Thomas said. "Anonymous complaints they won't substantiate." But here's the problem: landscaping standards are in the covenants, and they're harder to fight. We can argue retaliation, but we'd have to prove their motivation, which is tough. This is insane. She's harassing me because I won the truck case. I know, and you're probably right, but proving it legally is another matter. I was stuck. I couldn't afford to keep racking up fines, but I also didn't want to give Brenda the satisfaction of caving. Then Marcus had an idea. "Dude, you should run for the HOA board," he said one evening over beers. "Elections are coming up in June. 2 seats are open. If you win, you can fight her from the inside." "I don't have time for that." "You don't have time to keep fighting her either. Look, I'll run too. We'll campaign together. Lots of people in the neighborhood are sick of Brenda's nonsense. This could actually work." The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. According to the HOA bylaws, I needed 10 signatures from homeowners to get on the ballot. Marcus and I spent a weekend walking the neighborhood, explaining what we were doing. We got way more than 10 signatures. We got 47. Apparently, Brenda had made enemies far and wide. The campaign was surprisingly fun. Marcus made flyers on his computer, and we distributed them to every house. Our platform was simple: reasonable enforcement of rules, transparency from the board, and ending selective punishment of homeowners. We didn't mention Brenda by name, but everyone knew what we were talking about. Brenda's slate of candidates fought back. They put up their own flyers warning about radical elements trying to destroy the community standards that keep property values high. It was ridiculous, but some people bought into it. The election was held at the monthly meeting in June. Homeowners could vote in person or submit proxy votes beforehand. I was nervous as hell when Thomas and I walked into the packed clubhouse. Easily 60 people were there, by far the biggest turnout I'd seen. The voting took place by secret ballot. 2 seats were up for election, one held by Linda and another held by a guy who decided not to run again. Brenda wasn't up for re-election. Her term lasted another year. The vote counting took forever. Finally, the HOA's treasurer, a quiet older man named Bob, read the results. Marcus won 1 seat by a landslide. The other seat was closer, but I won by 12 votes. Linda was out. I could see Brenda's jaw tighten as the results were announced, but she forced a smile and congratulated us both. I look forward to working with you both to continue our mission of maintaining our beautiful community. Marcus and I took our seats at the front table for the remainder of the meeting. It felt surreal. 2 months ago, I'd been fighting just to park my truck at my house. Now I was on the board. Our first board meeting as members was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Brenda tried to do some damage control. She called me at home, her voice dripping with false friendliness. "Isaac, congratulations again on your election. I wanted to reach out personally to welcome you to the board and perhaps clear the air between us." Clear the air. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. The whole truck situation was simply about enforcing our covenants, nothing personal. Now that you're on the board, I hope we can work together constructively. Does working together constructively include dropping these bogus landscaping fines? There was a pause. The landscaping issue is separate. Multiple residents have complained. But perhaps we can discuss a reasonable timeline for bringing your property up to standard. My property is up to standard. It looks like everyone else's yard. Let's table this discussion for the board meeting, Brenda said smoothly. I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. The first board meeting was tense. Besides Brenda, Marcus, and me, there were 2 other board members. A woman named Patricia who seemed reasonable enough, and another woman named Deborah who clearly operated as Brenda's rubber stamp. With 5 board members total, votes were going to be tight. Brenda opened the meeting with standard business, then tried to rush through the agenda. Marcus stopped her. "Before we move on, I want to discuss the landscaping fines against Isaac. I think the board should vote to rescind them." "That's not on the agenda," Brenda said. "I'm adding it now." "That's allowed under the bylaws." Brenda's smile looked painted on. "Fine, let's discuss it. Isaac, your yard is not up to the standards clearly spelled out in our covenants. Multiple neighbors have complained. The board has a duty to enforce the rules." "Which neighbors?" I asked. "As I've explained, we don't disclose complainants." Marcus jumped in. "That policy needs to change. How can someone respond to complaints if they don't know who made them or what specifically they're complaining about? It's ripe for abuse." "Are you accusing the board of abusing the complaint process?" Brenda's voice turned icy. "I'm saying the policy is problematic." Patricia spoke up for the first time. "I actually agree with Marcus. I've never been comfortable with anonymous complaints. It doesn't seem fair." That was promising. I laid out my case, showing photos of my yard and nearby yards on my laptop. My landscaping looks substantially similar to at least 20 other properties in the neighborhood. If my yard is inadequate, then all of those are too. But I'm the only one being fined. That's selective enforcement. Deborah shook her head. "Your yard is noticeably worse. The grass is patchy." "Everyone's grass is patchy. It's Arizona. We're in a drought." The argument went back and forth for 20 minutes. Finally, Marcus called for a vote. "I move that we rescind all landscaping fines against Isaac's property and close this enforcement action." "Second," Patricia said. Brenda had no choice but to call the vote. Marcus, Patricia, and I voted yes. Brenda and Deborah voted no. The motion passed 3-2. I could see the fury behind Brenda's eyes, but she maintained her composure. Motion passes. The fines are rescinded. Small victory, but it felt good. Over the next few months, Marcus and I pushed for changes. We got the board to adopt a new policy requiring that complaints include the complainant's name, which could be kept confidential from the accused homeowner, but had to be on file. We revised the violation process to include a mandatory meeting with the homeowner before fines were assessed. We even got the board to commission a survey of residents asking what they actually wanted from the HOA. Brenda fought us on everything, but with Patricia often voting with us, we had a 3-2 majority on most issues. Deborah continued to vote however Brenda wanted, but she was increasingly isolated. The real turning point came in September. A homeowner named Greg Anderson requested time at the monthly meeting to lodge a complaint. He lived near the neighborhood entrance and was clearly nervous as he addressed the board. "I want to file a formal complaint about harassment from Brenda Morrison," he said. "Over the past 6 months, I've received 11 violation notices from the HOA for increasingly minor issues. My house number wasn't visible enough from the street. My mailbox had a small rust spot. My driveway had some weeds in the cracks. Every time I fix something, there's a new violation." "What's your question, Mr. Anderson?" Brenda interrupted. "My question is, why am I being targeted?" "I talked to other homeowners, and several people have told me it's because I didn't vote for your candidates in the last election. Is the HOA board using violations to punish people for their political choices?" The room went dead quiet. Brenda's face flushed. "That's a serious accusation, and it's completely unfounded." "Is it? Because I'm not the only one. I've talked to 5 other homeowners who voted for Isaac and Marcus, and 4 of them have seen an increase in violations since the election." Marcus leaned forward. "Greg, do you have documentation of these violations? All of them?" "I brought copies." He handed a stack of papers to Marcus. We spent the next half hour reviewing them. Greg was right, the violations were nitpicky to an absurd degree. Things that no reasonable person would consider problems. And when we looked at the signature on each violation notice, they'd all been issued personally by Brenda, not by the HOA's management company. Patricia looked disturbed. "Brenda, did you personally inspect Greg's property 11 times in 6 months?" "I drive past his house regularly. When I see violations, I document them. That's my job as board president." "You personally inspect other properties this frequently?" "When necessary." I'd had enough. "This is harassment, Brenda. You're abusing your position as board president to target homeowners who opposed you politically." "I'm enforcing the covenants, which is what residents expect from their board." "No," Marcus said. "You're being vindictive and petty, and it's going to stop." Brenda stood up abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted. This meeting is adjourned." "You can't adjourn the meeting unilaterally," I said. "It requires a board vote. I'm the president." "That doesn't give you dictatorial powers. Sit down, or I'll move to have you removed from the meeting for disrupting board business." For a moment, I thought she might storm out anyway. But she sat down, trembling with anger. Patricia made a motion to rescind all of Greg Anderson's violations and to implement a new policy requiring that all violations be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being issued. The motion passed 3-2. After the meeting, several homeowners approached Marcus and me thanking us for standing up to Brenda. Apparently, her reign of petty tyranny had affected more people than we'd realized. 2 weeks later, Brenda resigned from the board. Her resignation letter was terse, claiming she was stepping down due to personal commitments and health concerns. But word quickly spread that her husband had pressured her to quit after learning she'd spent hours each week driving around the neighborhood looking for violations to write up. Patricia became the new board president. She was fair, reasonable, and actually interested in what residents wanted rather than imposing her personal vision. The HOA meetings became shorter and less contentious. The neighborhood felt different, less tense, more like an actual community. Marcus and I served out our terms and decided not to run for re-election. We'd accomplished what we'd set out to do, end the harassment and create a more reasonable HOA board. Two younger homeowners stepped up to run and won, bringing fresh energy and perspectives. I still see Brenda around the neighborhood occasionally. We don't speak. She walks her little dog in the mornings, always looking carefully at other people's yards as she passes, probably still cataloging violations in her head that she no longer has the power to enforce. My work truck still sits in my driveway every night. I've added a second truck actually, now that my electrical business has grown enough to hire an apprentice. Both trucks have my company logo proudly displayed. Nobody has complained. The whole experience taught me something important about HOAs and community governance. The rules themselves matter less than who's enforcing them and why. A reasonable person applying rules fairly can maintain community standards without making people's lives miserable. But give someone like Brenda Morrison even a little bit of power, and they'll abuse it to feed their own ego and settle personal scores. It also taught me the importance of staying engaged. For years, I'd ignored the HOA, never going to meetings or paying attention to who was on the board. That apathy allowed people like Brenda to take control and run things according to their personal whims. When homeowners actually participate and hold board members accountable, HOAs can function the way they're supposed to. Thomas still jokes about the case whenever I see him. The Great Truck War of Mesa, he calls it. He's used my case as an example when consulting with other Arizona homeowners facing similar HOA disputes. Apparently, it's a common issue HOAs trying to ban work vehicles despite the state statute that protects them. The attorney's fees the HOA had to reimburse me totaled $1,300. I used part of it to take Thomas out for a nice dinner as a thank you. The rest went into my business account. Ironic that Brenda's overreach ended up funding a new set of tools and equipment for the very work truck she tried so hard to get rid of. Marcus sold his house last year and moved to Chandler for a job opportunity. Before he left, we had one last beer at our usual dive bar. "Man, that whole thing was wild," he said. "Who knew parking your truck at home could turn into a federal case?" "Wasn't quite federal," I laughed. "But yeah, it got out of hand fast. You ever regret fighting it? Would have been easier just to rent a storage unit." "Not for a second." It was the principle. I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I wasn't going to be bullied into spending my own money to solve a problem that didn't exist. That's what I always liked about you. Stubborn as hell when you know you're right. We clinked our beers together and watched the Cardinals game on the bar's TV, not talking about HOAs or Brenda Morrison or any of it. Just two friends enjoying a beer the way it should be. Looking back now, almost 2 years after the whole thing started, I'm grateful it happened. Not grateful for the stress or the legal fees or the hours of lost sleep, but grateful because it forced me to engage with my community and stand up for myself. It reminded me that laws exist to protect regular people from exactly this kind of petty tyranny, and sometimes you have to be willing to fight to make those laws mean something. My neighborhood is better now. The HOA board is functional and reasonable. Homeowners actually show up to meetings because they know their voices will be heard. The common areas are maintained, the rules are enforced fairly, and people aren't living in fear of arbitrary violation notices appearing on their doors. And my truck. It sits in my driveway every single night, right where it belongs. Sometimes I glance at it and smile, remembering the ridiculous battle it sparked. But mostly I don't think about it at all. It's just my truck parked at my house, exactly like it should be. Last month, a new family moved in down the street. The husband is a contractor who drives a truck even bigger than mine, with his company name in bold letters across both sides. I introduced myself and welcomed them to the neighborhood. "Nice truck," I said. "You'll have no problems parking it here." He looked relieved. "Really? The HOA at our last place gave us constant grief about it." "Not here. We had some issues a while back, but they're resolved. State law protects your right to park a work truck at your house. Just make sure it's under 10,000 pounds gross weight and you're good." "Thanks, man. That's good to know." I gave him my number and told him to call if he ever had any problems. Then I told him about Thomas Ray's, just in case. You never know when you might need a good HOA attorney. Life moves on. The drama fades, but the lessons stick with you. Stand up for yourself. Know your rights. Don't let petty tyrants push you around just because they have a title and a violation notice pad. And sometimes, the best way to change a broken system is to get involved and fix it from the inside. These days, when I pull into my driveway after a long day of running wire and installing panels, I feel nothing but satisfaction. This is my house, my property, my driveway, and that's my truck sitting right there, exactly where it has every legal and moral right to be. Brenda Morrison can glare at it from down the street all she wants. It's not going anywhere.